What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Parisi Podcast. We are closing out 2025 strong on a high note and with one of our most popular and most frequently requested topics of conversation, speed programming. When I was looking back through Parisi All Access at what the most viewed content pieces were, articles, webinars, master classes that we produced, the clear number one was by far and away our programming for speed masterclass. So what I wanted to do was pull out three key topics that we really address in that masterclass and talk about them today. Obviously, this is not a pitch, but it is a pitch, shameless production for the All Access platform, but this will be a useful podcast. I hate it when you listen to an article or read an article, listen to a podcast, watch a video on YouTube, whatever, and you think you're actually going to get tangible takeaways, and the person just steers you to a completely different product, link, affiliate link, whatever. That's not what this is. I will actually 100% be sharing the answers to the errors. I don't want to say errors, that's kind of harsh, but the inefficiencies or the challenges that coaches often come to us with. And that is one of my favorite things about the All Access platform and what we do at the Parisi Speed School. I refer to a lot of what we do as living courses or living topics because to me, they are alive. They are based off of what coaches and performance coaches, whatever you want to title yourself in the industry, people who work with athletes, when they come to us with a problem, that's how we know what to talk about, what content pieces to make, what answers to solve. So I think of it as a living piece because, quite frankly, it's the questions that the industry has for us. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into it. I've got it outlined right in front of me. You can't see it. Well, if you're listening to this, you can't see anything. But if you're watching this on YouTube, shameless plug, go watch us on YouTube. You can see the amazing resolution quality of the camera that pod producer Josh told me to buy. But we'll jump right in here. So number one this is by far the number one inefficiency that I see coaches struggling with when they come to us. They say, hey, I'm spending all this time writing programs. I love coaching. I love writing programs, but I'm finding that it's taking up a ton of my actual administrative time outside of coaching. And if you're coaching 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 hours a week of actual hands-on team training sessions or traveling to and from teams or individuals, whatever it is, and then you're adding in the administrative side of writing programs, that takes a lot of additional time. So the number one thing is the lack of organization that goes into preparation for programming. If you're sitting down and you have no system in place and you're just starting right from scratch, and a lot of us do that. I know I personally used to do this. I would sit down, I'd have the athlete or team intake form, I'd have like the team standardized, like the actual testing results. I would run Excel, I would put everything into Excel and I would run like averages, team averages, highs, lows, the medians, and I would try to figure out what area we needed to address first. And then I would sit down and I would write the program from scratch. I would do this with individual programming. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying it does take a lot of time. And what really helped me, and this was something that I think I was very fortunate going into this career as a 21-year-old. I literally graduated college on a Saturday. On a Sunday, I was going to Fair Lawn, New Jersey to do the Parisi thing, right? It was a full week of franchise training. And one of the things that was brought to me was, this is how we do it at Parisi. And what it was a templated approach. And as time went on and I would teach the Parisi certification to other facilities, I would get a lot of pushback on this idea of a templated approach and utilizing a template to craft and create your group sessions, your individual programs, your team training, because a lot of coaches just thought it was fraudulent. They would say, well, it's not truly individualized if you're using a template. Or they would say, and this was the phrase that would really make me grin. They say, it takes away my creative abilities as a coach. And I think all that is fine if you believe it. I don't think any of it is correct. I think it couldn't be further from the truth. So to me, a templated approach means you're just organizing a process. You're organizing I don't want to say a system, but you're organizing a sequence of events that occur in a training session with you. It's funny, I think of it as often as like the choose your own ending books. We actually just bought one of these. My daughter is 7. My oldest daughter is 7. We were at a bookstore and I bought these are like from when I was a kid in the 90s. The original choose your own ending books, right? Where there's probably, I think this one had 21 different outcomes or whatever it might be. And it's just working through the same pages. So you can read the book over and over again and have a different outcome. And I think of a templated approach as being just that, where you have the same story, but you have different outcomes depending on how you follow the story and what you choose to do. And as a performance coach, you may have the same story, but with a different outcome depending on the story that you decide to follow based off of the athlete, the team, the group, the training block you're in, whatever it might be, is the variables that go into the story. So for us at Parisi, I watched Parisi. I've been a part of Parisi for 15 years now. And I've literally used and seen Parisi utilize a templated approach for that time, but Bill has been doing it for over 30 years. And the idea behind it is to address a need for organization. A templated approach probably gives you 80% of the puzzle, with the last 20% being customized to the individual needs. And I'll give you an example. So a Parisi training session follows 4 key quadrants, I guess, like 4 key areas, 4 key items throughout a training session. You have your warm-up, you have your mechanical drills, right, where you're actually like working on the skills related to whatever we're trying to improve on. It could be based off acceleration, change of direction, max velocity. And then we're going to go into an application phase where we're actually applying what we just learned through a sequence of, I'll say 3 to 5 carefully picked applications that address what we learned, right? If it was acceleration and knee drive, we would pick applications, or we would have a bank of applications that address that. If it is center of gravity management and change of direction, we would have a set of applications that would address just that. If it's max velocity, maybe we're working on front side mechanics and leg recovery, we would have a series of applications that address that. So we're choosing applications based off of what we are trying to teach and what we did work on in the learning phase of our session. And then we would finish with some type of challenge or gamification, a finisher, whatever you want to call it. I always like to use gamification of the session. When you're working with athletes, we want to get them out competing because you tend to see people moving in a very natural state at that point. So even if you just look at that, as far as a template goes, of just the order of operations, we do it in strength training pretty naturally. We warm up. We do some type of dynamic effort work early because our central nervous system's fresh. Then we get into really the strength training work of the session. Maybe it's your more voluminous part. Maybe it's where you're working out percentage-based intervals. I don't know. It's going to be based on your training philosophy and the individual, I'm sure. And then we finish with some type of accessory movements. We do it in strength. And for whatever reason, I find talking to coaches, when we get to speed training, sometimes we just forget that programming follows a lot of the same characteristics from strength to speed, speed to strength, and we just think it needs to be treated completely different, and that's not the case. So having a template can be as simple as just a structure of how you present your sessions from warm up to cool down, and everything in the middle. It can be very finite as far as here is what our movement prep looks like. Here is what our key applications for this, that, and the other thing look like. And here are our key cool down movements that we do, or key ways that we gamify the actual learning of the topics. It can be unique to you, but a templated approach helps organize how your training will be conducted. And when you go into a programming session, knowing what your programs are going to look like, 2 things happen. 1, you become more efficient in writing the program. And 2, if you're scaling, if you're someone who aspires to have a facility, if you're a training director with staff, if you're someone who just opened a facility looking to make your first wave of hires, this is how you scale. This is exactly how Bill did it with the Parisi Speed School. He said, hey, this is what a Parisi training session looks like. Here's the content that goes into those training sessions. Now we have a structure that we can now take to this location, this place, and this coach, and this avenue, whatever it may be. So don't think of a template as this is how it has to be. think of a template as a choose your own ending that you're writing and structuring for whatever it is that you do, coach, your niche, whatever it may be. I think you will find your speed programming becomes more efficient and more enjoyable of a process for you as a coach. That is number one. Number two is this reliance on tools for progress. So this was something that I saw early in my career. I worked in a commercial gym. It's where our Parisi Speed School was. There was 37 personal trainers. And this isn't a story about Parisi. This is a story about the personal trainers. 37 personal trainers between full-time and part-time. And what I found was that a lot of trainers, I don't know the exact number, I would say at least half, just off the top of my head, I could name names. We're not going to name names on this podcast. About half the trainers would rely on the equipment to drive results for their client. And that could be, we're taking them through the Cybex machine circuit, the equipment's there. That could mean that we're taking them through or utilizing Kaiser air-powered equipment to drive a stimulus. That means that we are utilizing very specific, like I have a cable machine right behind me, like using very specific training tools and attachments to train certain muscle groups, rather than understanding and having a firm understanding on what the actual applications or training tools do for the person. In speed training, this happens a lot, or I would see this happen where we would have our coaches, they would maybe utilize a prowler, a push sled, or a weighted sled to work on acceleration because they knew it would work, quote unquote, knew it would work. If you're watching this, you saw me just slap some huge air quotes in the air. They knew it would work. It was easy for them to implement. Kids found it engaging, athletes found it engaging, whatever it may be, but not realizing that they could achieve the same stimulus, the same outcome, the same mechanical teachings by doing either a sprint on the track with a push-up start or utilizing Viper cord, like a posterior band attachment, or a partner let go, or any of these other applications that took them away from the turf and the push sleds. But they needed the push sleds. That was what they knew. That's what they were comfortable with. So you can say it's a comfort for what you know, but I find it's an over-reliance on actual training tools to drive progress. Whereas we don't necessarily, or we as coaches, we need to have a firm understanding of what these applications are actually creating for the athlete. So what I would do when we would onboard coaches, and this is where I said, I promise you I would tell you exactly what we did and to solve these. And I'm not saying this is the finite way, you have to solve them, but this is just a very practical way that as someone who has experienced all three of these problems in the past, how I addressed it and how we've coached athletes and not athletes, but coached coaches in the Parisi system to correct them is when we look at these different training tools, whether it be a high velocity treadmill, push sleds, Viper cords, aqua bags, ohm machines, I'm trying to think of other things that we've used, partner manual resistance, medicine balls, we really dive into what those tools are doing so that way we can, one, know what we can interchange with in an acceleration session or max velocity or change of direction. We can interchange this for that depending on the facility logistics, which, being very candid, if you're someone listening to this who works in a facility, you know that a lot of your training session is going to be dictated on where you are in your facility. The size of your training group, 2, 3, 4, trains very differently than 8, 9, 10 kids, athletes in a group. And what else is going on around you? If there's a team that comes in and they have the bulk of the space and you're in this little corner, well, now you don't have access to all these different things. And one thing that I was very lucky, I always thought that I was kind of the chameleon coach, so to speak, whereas I could be in the corner with 5 yards of turf and I could put 12 kids through a sweet change of direction class flawlessly with zero added equipment. Or I could go onto a baseball field with a team and take them through a max velocity session with just cones, whatever it might be. And it was because I distinctly remember the great John Cirillo, Bill Parisi, Martin Rooney, these guys who, Steve Leo, these guys who taught me how to coach. I always say you should be able to be dropped in the middle of a field with 50 athletes of any sport at any age and be able to take them through a training session. And having that mindset really helped me understand that it's not about the tools, It's about you as a coach, right? And your ability to lead, to speak, to be engaging, to actually work through the session as an individual with just your voice. And that any tools that you have become an enhancement to what you as the individual bring. And that really was a huge mindset shift for me as a coach, because I realized that when you play your sport, you don't have a Viper cord attached to you. Yes, it's a great tool, and I love Viper cords, and they can be utilized in a lot of different varieties to enhance speed, but you may not have enough tools, enough of those for a team, or you may not have access to those because a team has just come in and now the other coach is utilizing the Viper cords and you have nothing. So if you find yourself reliant on tools for progress, there is going to be a bottleneck in your training and in your programming when you actually implement the session. The cliche that we've always had is, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, or your program is only as good as the effort you put into it, or your program is only as good as the person who's following the program or their ability to follow the program. So what we really need to do as coaches, and this was where it's useful, is write out what applications or training tools you have access to, and then write next to it, like on an Excel spreadsheet or Word document, then physically write this out, because this is going to become a standard operating procedure for coaches you hire down the road, or if you do aspire to scale your training business someday, this will be huge for you. Write out what the training tool is and what it does and where it's utilized in your training. And that goes back to number one, is having that organization template. Hey, this is a Viper cord. It gets utilized as an application for acceleration. We use it this way to help enhance this training mechanism or this training skill set. Now, when you hire a new coach, you scale a new coach, or you need to swap out a Viper cord. Maybe you have a machine that's getting serviced and you can't use it for the day. I don't know. It's just useful. And you'll be like, okay, instead of using this, we're going to use this. And we know it's going to utilize and help drive the same thing. This is going to help you improve your acceleration angle, right? Just trying to throw things out there, but write it out. Physically write these things out. Your template, number one, put it on paper. Don't just say it's in between the ears. Don't do that. That's only as good until you're in the moment and now you're thinking about the next thing rather than the actual people or person in front of you. And then two is the reliance on the tools. Write out what those tools are. Write out what you have and what they are used for. And that way you have an idea of where they can go in the template, but also if you're hiring a new coach, they'll understand where you can swap out these different items. So 1 and 2, you'll find that they go hand in hand together. And that's not like on purpose too, this idea of like everything kind of overlapping. When we're talking about this overarching concept of programming. So there's going to be a lot of variables that go into the program and they should mesh together in some way, because that's how having a programming system works. You have lots of different variables. They all touch each other in different ways when they're going through this big overlying concept of getting the program done. Have the template, know what goes into the template and where those things are going to impact the template. And then number 3 is maybe an overarching, this could be a whole podcast in itself, this whole overarching concept of progression. And the biggest issue, and I find like, not issue, but I'll say inefficiency or error or mindset, writer's block, so to speak, for a performance coach, is this idea of programming progression and the idea of what progression is. And that is where I think it can be very challenging for speed training, because when you look at something like running a 10-yard sprint, that's kind of the final boss, right? That's kind of the 1 rep max bench press or 1 rep max deadlift effort, right? It's a max velocity movement, max effort movement, and it is the thing that you might even be testing, right? And in the Parisi Speed School, we do test the 10-yard sprint as part of a 20 or a 40-yard longer sprint. So it is kind of the final boss, so to speak. So in a way, we're just trying to make better, right? So the idea of progression might not necessarily truly exist because we're just trying to help the athlete do the thing better. So you might not touch it, right? So if you're running repeat 10-yard sprints, you're not going to necessarily change the 10-yard sprint. You could, but you're doing different things throughout your programming, these different applications, to enhance that 10-yard sprint. So you might not change it. Better is better. We're trying to make the athlete better. But what we do need to understand is the lead up and build up to that final boss. So it's this idea with progression of there's two different elements that I often find myself talking to coaches about. Are you progressing the athlete based off of velocity needs? Because it's speed training, right? We need to move fast. That's the specificity of speed training. We're training people to be fast. You need to move fast to be fast. Train slow, you're going to be slow. That, I think we can argue. We don't need to argue like specificity is king. If you want to be fast, you need to figure out ways to move your body fast. But that doesn't mean that we're just always moving at 100% all the time, because if you're pushing a sled, marching a sled, you're not moving at 100% as far as velocity goes, but you may be mechanically altering the way your body moves. Okay? So there we go. I know if you're listening to this, we're trying our best to make this kind of black and white. And I know there's a lot of nuance, and I know there's a lot of, well, what about this and what about that? But for the sake of learning, follow me here, people. Okay? So we have progression based off of velocity, and we have progression based off of movement complexity, right? So this idea of, say we have that sled, it's in front of us and we're marching with the sled. Well, we're taking out arm action, right? So in a way, we're decreasing complexity. We have anterior weight that is supporting our body angle forward. So we have assistance in our mechanical angle. And then we have this weight that needs to be pushed, and we probably can't push it flat foot. So the environmental change is going to put us in a position where we can better apply force, right? So we are lowering the complexity of acceleration mechanics by having this anterior load, this sled, right? So follow me here. I'm trying to intentionally talk slower. Rewind that 15 seconds if you need to, but we are lowering the complexity. Whereas if we're moving from that sled to a fly sprint with a 10-yard build, a 10-yard sprint, and a 10-yard deceleration. So a 10-10-10 fly sprint, which I would say is probably a pretty standard application. Sure, you may have a shorter fly in. Sure, you may have a shorter deceleration, probably dependent on your facility logistics. But we have a 10-10-10 fly sprint. That is going to be more complex than the anterior sled march, because we are now adding in limb velocity, enhanced limb velocity. We're adding in more body movements, arms, leg, contralateral relationships, and we are also adding in potential deceleration, right? So physiological requirements are enhanced as well, right? We have more speed, so we're going to have more deceleration later down the line. So we have increased the complexity of our progression. So when you're writing your programs, understand what is going to be easier for the athlete to navigate, right? That anterior weight, that sled push, versus something like a 10-10-10 fly sprint. Now think about the 10-10-10 fly sprint as it relates to a laser-timed, fully automatic, laser-timed 10-yard sprint out of a 4-point stance. The complexity goes up for that laser-timed sprint, right? So you might say the velocity goes down because you're coming out of a standstill start, but the complexity goes up. So where are you finding this progression? Are you just having the athlete move faster, right, through velocity? Are you having athletes move with more complexity in the actual application itself? And I'm not here to say one way is right or one way that's wrong, but the error that I see coaches making is that they'll just have their session start with laser time 10s, and then they backtrack to sled pushes, and then they go to the fly sprint, and there's no actual progression through there. So you're just having athletes do stuff, and that's okay. It's all acceleration. I get it. Maybe it's what you have access to in your facility at the time. Like there's facility logistics everywhere. There's session logistics. There's the nuance in the training session. I get it. But if you have organization, if you have an understanding of what the tools do, and you have an understanding of how you want to progress athletes through movement complexity, through movement enhanced velocity, to what the desired outcomes are, you're going to put together a more complete program that point A to point B with a more straight line to get there, rather than a point A to point B with some zigzags, and now we're going to stop here. And sometimes that happens. Like, I've coached enough sessions, written enough programs that sometimes things happen, they're out of your control, or you do need to take the detour with the athlete or the team in order to address something. I get it. But for a coach, if you're trying to improve on your programming, you want to make sure you have what I call a progression chart or a progression tree, where you're outlining how movements progress from those tools, right? We had the tools, and this was point number 2. We wrote out what the tool was, we wrote out what the tool did, and now we can really fit that tool inside of a progression chart. This progression chart is going to have regressions, right? If we are starting here, we can't do it, we're going to be down here. It's also going to have lateralization. So things that we can move aside and kind of those detours, those little adjacent side steps. Well, maybe we can't do, or maybe we have the sled push, but we are still having issues with the arm. So now maybe we need to go with a heavy sled drag or manual resistance drag with a person holding an actual belt loop behind them. And now they're able to utilize arms and legs marching together, right? We have these different nuances where we can just say a little sidestep, lateralization. Then we do have the true progression based off of complexity, velocity, whatever it may be. And I know it may sound like a lot, but I would guess, and this is kind of like if you've ever coached someone on nutrition, people eat about 80% of the same stuff day to day, week to week, right? We have probably 2 or 3 different breakfast options that we rotate through. Some people eat the same breakfast every morning. People probably have like 2 or 3 main dinner meals that they cook or variations of it. Same with lunch options. And I would guess that most performance coaches probably have 2, 3, maybe 4 key acceleration applications that they love. They would have probably 2, 3, maybe 4 key max velocity applications that they love. And probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 key applications for change of direction or multi-directional abilities, depending on what you want to classify those as, that they love. And if you are listening to this and you're smirking because you do indeed have 2, 3, maybe 4 key applications that you love, it's not overwhelming to organize those key applications that you use often. Start there. And then you can put some of the peripheral pieces around. I know for me, when I look at my training, I have a couple things that I really like to do with athletes because they have easy entry points. They're easy to teach. They layer in really well to what I'm doing in the early application phase of our training sessions. When we actually teach mechanical work, like, hey, here's how you punch your knees in acceleration. Here's how you shift your weight and change your direction. These are the applications that tend to piggyback on those teaching points really well. And it helps. So create the actual chart in the progression tree. Make sure you understand what those movements are doing, right? That's point number 2. And then know where they fit within the organization of your training session. And that's the organization of a template. So when it comes to speed programming inefficiencies, errors, or wanting to be a better programmer for speed training, a lot of these pieces do go hand in hand, but if you can improve on one, you will start to find that you need to improve in other areas. And it's an ever-moving process. And I do tell coaches that your standardized programming philosophy will probably stay pretty similar, right? Like how we program, like it's probably going to be not something you update or have major updates every year, but probably every 18 months to 2 years, maybe 3. But hopefully you have an open mind enough where you're thinking about these updates or slight tweaks every 18 months to 2 years. I can tell you the Parisi Speed School operates on something like that, where it's every 18 months to 2 years, we're sitting down as a company and saying, okay, what are we doing? What is the research telling us? What is actually happening in our training sessions? Where do we need to adjust? And I'm sure for us as performance coaches, that's an uncomfortable process, but we need to do that in order to keep evolving with the science and with the living industry around us, but also so that when we sit down to write the programs, to conduct the sessions, we're putting together a better product for us to deliver and for our athletes, our teams, our groups to experience. So hopefully you found this podcast, whether you're watching it or listening to it, useful, just addressing 3 common speed errors, inefficiencies, whatever word you want to use. I don't want it to be too harsh, but if you're sitting down, you want to be better at writing programs, think about these 3 core concepts. And I know you will ultimately have a better product on paper for your athletes and for you to deliver to those athletes. So Coach Casey signing off for another Parisi podcast. I will catch you all next week, and I hope you have a phenomenal and safe start to 2026.